Hi everybody. I was just sitting here and I was going through my Instagram, going through my comments, and I got a question from somebody asking about this. So I shared this meme that's a quote by Judith Herman. Judith Herman wrote this book, Trauma and Recovery: The Aftermath of Violence from Domestic Abuse to Political Terror. So this is the quote on the meme, okay? Helplessness and isolation are the core experiences of psychological trauma. Empowerment and reconnection are the core experiences of recovery. Judith Herman. Okay, so the question I got was, what are we supposed to reconnect with? So I looked it up. First of all, just to give a brief outline of the stages of recovery according to Judith Herman in her book here. The core experiences of psychological trauma are disempowerment and disconnection from others. Recovery, therefore, is based upon the empowerment of the survivor and creation of new connections. Recovery can take place only within the context of relationships. It cannot occur in isolation. In her renewed connections with other people, the survivor recreates the psychological faculties that were damaged or deformed by the traumatic experiences. These faculties include the basic capacities for trust, autonomy, initiative, competence, identity, and intimacy. Just as these capabilities are originally formed in relationships with other people, they must be reformed in such relationships. So the first principle of recovery is the empowerment of the survivor. She must be the author and arbiter of her own recovery. Others may offer advice, support, assistance, affection, and care, but not cure. Many benevolent and well-intentioned attempts to assist the survivor founder because this fundamental principle of empowerment is not observed. No intervention that takes power away from the survivor can possibly foster her recovery, no matter how much it appears to be in her immediate best interest. In the words of an incest survivor, good therapists were those who really validated my experience and helped me to control my behavior rather than trying to control me. Okay, so this is the one thing that I would really like to hopefully, push home, that make sure that you understand this, that it is you and only you that can bring about your recovery. Because what I am learning is, we need guidance. Yes, it's good to have a counselor. It's good to have a, a book, or, somebody, a therapist, somebody to talk to, somebody who is giving you this guidance, because when we come from traumatic past, we don't have the tools necessary that we need, to find these self-help things. What I'm saying is, ultimately, it is up to us to take those tools, to take this help and to use it to help ourselves. We need to take back our power. We need to empower ourselves. So, let me just continue. Okay, so I'm just going to flip ahead here to talk about the steps of recovery. Recovery unfolds in 3 stages. The central task of the first stage is the establishment of safety. So that's step 1, safety. The central task of the second stage is remembrance and mourning. So step 2, remembrance and mourning, talking about it and grieving over what happened. The central task of the third stage is reconnection with ordinary life. Like any abstract concept, these stages of recovery are a convenient fiction, not to be taken too literally. So she's basically saying, it's not going to be happening in a straight line, just like we always talk about recovery is not linear. They are an attempt to impose simplicity and order upon a process that is inherently turbulent and complex, but the same basic concept of recovery stages has emerged repeatedly, from Janet's classic work on hysteria to recent descriptions of work with combat trauma, dissociative disorders, and multiple personality disorder. One therapist describes the progression through the stages of recovery as a spiral, in which earlier issues are continually revisited on a higher level of integration. However, in the course of a successful recovery, it should be possible to recognize a gradual shift from unpredictable danger to reliable safety, from dissociated trauma to acknowledged memory, and from stigmatized isolation to restored social connection. The traumatic syndromes are complex disorders requiring complex treatment. Because trauma affects every aspect of human functioning, from the biological to the social, treatment must be comprehensive. Because recovery occurs in stages, treatment must be appropriate at each stage. A form of therapy that may be useful for a patient at one stage may be of little use or even harmful to the same patient at another stage. Furthermore, even a well-timed therapy intervention may fail if the other necessary components of treatment appropriate to each stage are absent. At each stage of recovery, comprehensive treatment must address the characteristic biological, psychological, and social components of the disorder. There is no single efficacious magic bullet for the traumatic syndromes. So first of all, as we've talked about, there's that really important part of feeling safe, right? Feeling safe enough to, like with your therapist. That's why we always recommend, also, you hear people talking about recommending that you find a trauma-informed therapist so that they know what they're dealing with, so they don't re-traumatize you. So yeah, safety is the very important first step, is to make sure that you feel safe. And I think that's a big part of what isolation is. It is something that we naturally do once we've been traumatized. We want to isolate away from other people. But I think it's a part of the natural recovery process. Once we've been hurt, I think, is to isolate ourselves. And through that process of isolation, we are regaining our feeling of being safe in the world. I think that we can run the danger of perpetuating that feeling of unsafety. And it's not even conscious. It's, of course, unconscious because of survival mode kicking in. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so it's very important for us to feel safe. That's part of the reason why I still use the filter, because I don't quite have that level of safety here. Like, I don't feel like quite yet. But like I said, I'm getting closer and closer to that feeling of, of knowing that there isn't really a danger. But anyway, so after safety comes remembrance and mourning. So let's just read this part really quick. In the second stage of recovery, the survivor tells the story of the trauma. She tells it completely, in depth, and in detail. This work of reconstruction actually transforms the traumatic memory so that it can be integrated into the survivor's life story. Janet described normal memory as the action of telling a story. Traumatic memory, by contrast, is wordless and static. The survivor's initial account of the event may be repetitious, stereotyped, and emotionless. One observer describes the trauma story in its untransformed state as a pre-narrative. It does not develop or progress in time, and it does not reveal the storyteller's feelings or interpretation of events. Another therapist describes traumatic memory as a series of still snapshots or a silent movie. The role of therapy is to provide the music and the words. The basic principle of empowerment continues to apply during the second stage of recovery. The choice to confront the horrors of the past rests with the survivor. The therapist plays the role of a witness and ally, in whose presence the survivor can speak of the unspeakable. The reconstruction of trauma places great demands on the courage of both patient and therapist. It requires that both be clear in their purpose and secure in their alliance. Freud provides an eloquent description of the patient's approach to uncovering work in psychotherapy. The patient must find the courage to direct his attention to the phenomena of his illness. His illness must no longer seem to him contemptible, but must become an enemy worthy of his mettle, a piece of his personality, which has solid ground for its existence, and out of which things of value for his future life have to be derived. The way is thus paved for a reconciliation with the repressed material which is coming to expression in his symptoms, while at the same time place is found for a certain tolerance for the state of being ill. As the survivor summons her memories, the need to preserve safety must be balanced constantly against the need to face the past. The patient and therapist together must learn to negotiate a safe passage between the twin dangers of constriction and intrusion. Avoiding the traumatic memories leads to stagnation in the recovery process, while approaching them too precipitately leads to a fruitless and damaging reliving of the trauma. Decisions regarding pacing and timing need meticulous attention and frequent review by patient and therapist in concert. There is room for honest disagreement between patient and therapist on these matters, and differences of opinions should be aired freely and resolved before the work of reconstruction proceeds. Okay, so let's go to the last stage, which is reconnection. And this is where I got the question. So, having come to terms with the traumatic past, after going through the first two stages, the survivor faces the task of creating a future. So this is the stage, this is reconnection. We're creating a future. Yeah, see? This is what I found very interesting, and I think that is very true. In order to move forward, we have to realize that we're not going to be the same as we were before, that this has actually changed us, and it's going to become a part of us. And it's not like we're never going to recover. That's not the thing. That is what recovery is creating a new future life, self. So let me just... The patient must find the courage to direct his attention to the phenomena of his illness. His illness must no longer seem to him contemptible, but must become an enemy worthy of his mettle, a piece of his personality which has solid ground for its existence, very solid ground for its existence because of what happened, and out of which things of value for his future life have to be derived. Okay, so let me just skip to reconnection. Having come to terms with the traumatic past, the survivor faces the task of creating a future. She has mourned the old self that the trauma destroyed. Now she must develop a new self. Her relationships have been tested and forever changed by the trauma. Now she must develop new relationships. The old beliefs that gave meaning to her life have been challenged. Now she must find a sustaining faith. These are the tasks of the third stage of recovery. In accomplishing this work, the survivor reclaims her world. Survivors whose personality has been shaped in the traumatic environment often feel at this stage of recovery as though they are refugees entering a new country. For political exiles, this may be literally true, but for many others, such as battered women or survivors of childhood abuse, the psychological experience can only be compared to immigration. They must build a new life within a radically different culture from the one they have left behind. Emerging from an environment of total control, they feel simultaneously the wonder and uncertainty of freedom. They speak of losing and regaining the world. Psychiatrist Michael Stone, drawing on his work with incest survivors, describes the immensity of this adaptive task. All victims of incest have, by definition, been taught that the strong can do as they please, without regard for convention. Re-education is often indicated, pertaining to what is typical, average, wholesome, and normal in the intimate life of ordinary people. Victims of incest tend to be woefully ignorant of these matters, owing to their skewed and secretive early environments. Although victims in their original homes, they are like strangers in a foreign country, once safely outside. The issue of the first stage of recovery are often revisited during the third. Once again, the survivor devotes energy to the care of her body, her immediate environment, her material needs, and her relationships with others. But while in the first stage the goal was simply to secure a defensive position of basic safety, by the third stage the survivor is ready to engage more actively in the world. From her newly created safe base, she can now venture forth. She can establish an agenda. She can recover some of her aspirations from the time before the trauma, or perhaps for the first time, she can discover her own ambitions. Helplessness and isolation are the core experiences of psychological trauma. Empowerment and reconnection are the core experiences in recovery. In the third stage of recovery, the traumatized person recognizes that she has been a victim and understands the effects of her victimization. Now she is ready to incorporate the lessons of her traumatic experience into her life. She is ready to take concrete steps to increase her sense of power and control, to protect herself against future danger, and to deepen her alliances with those whom she has learned to trust. A survivor of childhood sexual abuse describes her arrival at this stage. Begin quote. I decided, okay, I've had enough of walking around like I'd like to brutalize everyone who looks at me wrong. I don't have to feel like that anymore. Then I thought, how would I like to feel? I wanted to feel safe in the world. I wanted to feel powerful. And so I focused on what was working in my life, in the ways I was taking power in real life situations. End quote. I'm just going to read this next little part here because it's something that that I'm starting to realize what I need to do. Learning to fight. Taking power in real-life situations often involves a conscious choice to face danger. By this stage of recovery, survivors understand that their post-traumatic symptoms represent a pathological exaggeration of the normal responses to danger. They are often keenly aware of their continued vulnerability to threats and reminders of the trauma. Rather than passively accepting these reliving experiences, survivors may choose actively to engage their fears. On one level, the choice to expose oneself to danger can be understood as yet another reenactment of trauma. Like reenactment, this choice is an attempt to master the traumatic experience, unlike reenactment. However, it is undertaken consciously in a planned and methodical manner, and is therefore far more likely to succeed. For those who have never learned the basics of physical self-defense, this instruction can become a method of both psychological mastery and physiological reconditioning. So that's where I am. Anyways, that's where I am. I'm at the beginning stages of that, realizing that I need to just, you know, face my fears, basically. You know, saying, like, learning to face danger, for me, that just feels like just going outside, because outside feels dangerous. And for me, that just means going around people, you know? If I can't find a good therapist here, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to try to find somebody online. Or I'm just going to use all of these books that I have. You know, like I have this one, and I have the Inner Child Workbook, and The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm just going to do what I have to do. Because when it comes right down to it, it is me who's going to heal me. It is me that has to do the work. It is me that has to incorporate the self-care and the self-protection. You know, reparent myself. I have to do the actions. I have to go through this process, go through these different stages. And I think part of me isolating in my bedroom like this is still part of the first stage. Just like they say, it's not like like you may go into the second stage and you know, like I've been telling my story, I've been talking and stuff, and then I go back into the first stage. I go back to like needing to feel safe. And what I was talking about in my last video about feeling like I need to push myself, feeling like it's time to like get out of my comfort zone, is, I think, realizing that I'm ready to start moving into that third stage, you know, of reconnection. And I really, really love that this explanation of how it's going to be forming a new self with this part of you as integrated as a part of you. It's like, it's not like, oh, I'm never going to recover because I'm never going to I'm always going to have to be dealing with these symptoms, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's not always going to be, you're not always going to be hypervigilant. You're not always going to be angry. You're not always going to be having all these horrible symptoms. But through the process of self-care and self-love, you will learn to deal with these symptoms, and you will learn to overcome them, and you'll learn what works for you. And this is the most important time I feel in my life. I'm really learning who I am and what I need and what I want and what I like and what all of that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to do this again tomorrow. Let me know if there's any particular part of what I talked about today that you would like me to talk about a little bit more. Maybe go over again. I don't know. So yeah, give this video a like if you liked it. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please leave me a comment down in the comment section, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.